Let's start with the disasters that just felt like bad weather, and slowly work our way towards the ones that drowned cities, cooked entire countries, and turned millions of people into climate refugees overnight. We're not talking about dinosaurs or ice ages here. We're talking about our century. Smartphones, social media, streaming TV, and, in the background, a climate system that has started to behave like it's had enough of us. In this video, we're counting down the deadliest climate disasters of the 21st century, not the most expensive, not the most famous, the ones that quietly stacked up the most graves. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll see why climate scientists keep saying this isn't about saving the planet will be fine. It's about saving ourselves from living in a world where this becomes normal. Number 8. Australia's Black Summer, when a continent caught fire. We're starting with a disaster that felt less like a season and more like the world's longest horror movie. In late 2019, Australia was already in trouble. Years of drought had baked forests, grasslands, and farms into one giant pile of kindling. Heat waves pushed temperatures into, are we sure this isn't an oven territory? Then, the fires started. At first, just a few. Bushfires are normal in Australia, but this time, they didn't stop. By the time the 2019-2020 Black Summer fire season ended, flames had burned an area larger than many countries, destroyed thousands of homes, pushed entire towns to evacuate to beaches, turned midday skies dark orange. People fled to the shoreline, standing in ankle-deep water while the hills behind them burned. The Navy had to pull families off beaches like it was a war zone. The smoke didn't just stay in Australia. It drifted across oceans, circling the globe. Firefighters and volunteers died on the front lines. Others died from heat, smoke, and heart and lung complications. And then there was the wildlife. Scientists estimate that well over 1 billion animals were killed or displaced. Koalas, kangaroos, birds, insects, entire ecosystems scorched. This wasn't a bad fire season. It was a glimpse of what happens when hotter temperatures, longer droughts, and flammable forests all get shoved into the same year. Australia didn't just have a summer, it had a preview. Number 7. The 2010 Russian Heatwave, when the air turned to smoke. Imagine walking outside and feeling like you're stepping into a hairdryer full of campfire smoke. Now, imagine that lasting for weeks. In the summer of 2010, Western Russia was hit by a brutal heat wave. Day after day, temperatures climbed far above the local average. Fields dried out. Forests went from green to brown to ash. Wildfires and burning peat bogs surrounded Moscow and nearby regions. Thick smoke settled over cities. Visibility dropped. People walked the streets in masks long before that became a global trend. Hospitals filled up as elderly people, those with heart and lung problems, and anyone working outside struggled to breathe in the hot, toxic air. The official numbers and the real numbers don't always match. But excess death statistics suggest tens of thousands of people died during that summer, not from dramatic events, but from heat stroke, heart attacks, and respiratory failure in baking apartments and smoky streets. On top of that, crop failures hammered Russia's wheat harvest. Exports were restricted. Food prices rose around the world, all from a heat wave centered on one region. The scariest part? Many victims never left their homes. They just overheated. This is what climate disaster often looks like. No roaring tsunami. No dramatic movie shot. Just heat and smoke and silence. Number 6. The 2010 Pakistan floods when a river swallowed a country. Next, we go from heat and fire to water. A lot of water. In the summer of 2010, monsoon rains over Pakistan were heavier and more persistent than usual. The Indus River, already a giant, swelled beyond anything locals could remember. Rivers that usually sat politely between their banks turned into raging inland seas. One official described it like this. It was as if the entire river system stood up, took a deep breath, and moved sideways. Floodwaters swept from the mountainous north all the way down to the Arabian Sea, washing through villages, towns, roads, and farmland. At one point, roughly 1/5 to 1/3 of the entire country was underwater. People climbed onto rooftops, road embankments, and any tiny strip of dry ground, and waited. Helicopters dropped food where they could. Boats weaved between half-submerged houses. Entire families sat on little islands of mud, surrounded by brown water and dead livestock. Thousands died directly from the floods and landslides. Millions lost homes, crops, and livelihoods. And when the water finally receded, the second wave began. Contaminated wells, waterborne diseases, malnutrition. In a warmer climate, the atmosphere can hold more moisture. More moisture means heavier downpours. Heavier downpours mean floods that don't just inconvenience cities. They redraw the map. Pakistan 2010 wasn't just a flood, it was a warning. When it rains, it will really, really rain. Number 5. Cyclone Nargis. When the sea walked inland. On the evening of May 2nd, 2008, the Irrawaddy Delta in Myanmar, Burma, was as ready as it could be. They'd seen storms before. Houses were built on stilts. People knew how to tie things down and ride it out. What they hadn't seen was Cyclone Nargis. Nargis wasn't just strong. It hit the exact wrong place in the exact wrong way. As the cyclone made landfall, it whipped up a massive storm surge. A wall of ocean water driven inland by wind and low pressure. In the dark of night, while people huddled in their wooden homes, the sea simply climbed over the coast and kept going. Villages were smashed apart. Boats, trees, houses, animals, and people were swept into swirling black water. Entire families died in a single night. Some survivors woke up clinging to debris, surrounded by corpses and the ruins of villages that no longer existed. The death toll ran into the hundreds of thousands. And if that wasn't bad enough, the political situation made everything worse. Initial warnings were inadequate, aid offers from other countries were delayed or restricted, some survivors waited days for help that never came. Saltwater flooded rice paddies, poisoning soil for seasons. Children were left orphaned. Maps had to be redrawn. Cyclone Nargis showed what happens when low-lying, densely populated deltas, weak infrastructure, and rising seas meet a storm supercharged by warm ocean water. The wind was fierce, but it was the ocean, walking miles inland in the dark, that did most of the killing. Number 4. The 2003 European Heatwave, the disaster nobody believed in. When you think deadly climate disaster, you probably don't picture retirees in Paris apartments. You should. In the summer of 2003, Western Europe slid into what looked, at first, like a normal hot spell. Then it kept going, and going, and going. Temperatures stayed far above average for weeks. Nights didn't cool down. Cities turned into giant stone ovens. Europe was, and still is, full of buildings designed to keep heat in, not out. Thick walls, small windows, no air conditioning, especially in homes for the elderly. Many older people lived alone. Families went on holiday, assuming it's just summer. Meanwhile, grandma or grandpa sat in an apartment that had slowly turned into a slow cooker. Hospitals started reporting spikes in dehydration, heat stroke, heart problems. Morgues filled up. Temporary facilities were needed to handle the bodies. By the time it was over, the 2003 heat wave had killed tens of thousands of people across France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and beyond, all in some of the richest, most medically advanced countries on Earth. No flood to photograph. No dramatic explosion. Just people quietly dying in buildings that were never meant for a world this hot. Climate change didn't suddenly invent heat waves, but it loaded the dice. Higher baseline temperatures, more intense, persistent highs, more nights when the body doesn't get to cool down. Europe got a brutal wake-up call. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. Number 3. Typhoon Haiyan, when the wind erased the coastline. Next, we head to the Philippines, a country that knows typhoons very well. But in November 2013, they met something else. Typhoon Haiyan, locally called Yolanda, was one of the strongest tropical cyclones ever recorded at landfall. The numbers don't really convey it. So picture this instead. You're standing in a coastal city like Tacloban. The wind is already screaming, tearing roofs off. Then the sea starts to rise. Not slowly, like a normal high tide, but in huge walls of water storm, surges slamming into the shore. Houses near the coast are smashed. Concrete buildings lose their lower floors. People who thought they were safe upstairs suddenly find water bursting through doors and windows. Videos from survivors show entire neighborhoods being shredded. Cars tumbling, boats thrown into streets, families clinging to debris as everything they own disappears. Thousands died, some swept out to sea, others crushed under debris, others killed by flying objects in winds that might as well have been a giant blender. Mass graves had to be dug. Bodies lay uncollected for days. The smell of salt, mud, and death hung in the air. The aftermath looked like a bomb had gone off over an entire region. Power lines down, roads blocked, no food or clean water. Hospitals wrecked. As seawater heats up with global warming, storms like Haiyan can grow faster, stronger, and hold that strength right up to landfall. For millions of people living in fragile homes along tropical coasts, that difference is the line between a bad storm and there used to be a town here. Haiyan didn't just damage Tacloban, it erased parts of it. Number 2. South Asia's heat waves and floods. Riding the climate roller coaster. If you want to see what living on the front lines of climate chaos looks like, you don't need Hollywood. You need South Asia. Over the last couple of decades, countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh have been hit by repeated waves of extreme heat and destructive floods. A single event might grab headlines for a week, but for people living there, it feels like one long, rolling disaster. Picture a heat wave. Temperatures soaring well above 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, hot winds blowing like a hairdryer in your face, surfaces so hot you can't touch them. Now, picture living in a metal roof shack, a crowded urban slum, or a village with limited access to electricity and water. You still have to work. Construction workers, rickshaw drivers, farmers, street vendors. People collapse in fields, on buses, at work sites. Hospitals overflow. Electric grids strain under air conditioning for those who can afford it. Then, sometimes just months later, the sky flips. Monsoon rains, intensified by warmer oceans and a more jittery atmosphere, dump enormous amounts of water. Rivers burst their banks. Glacial meltwater adds to the flow from the Himalayas. Suddenly, you're watching footage of entire villages underwater, roads washed away, people wading chest-deep carrying children and whatever they can grab. In some years, like 2022, floods cover vast chunks of Pakistan again, destroying homes and crops for tens of millions of people. Taken individually, each heat wave, each flood, each landslide has its own body count and damage report. Taken together across 2 decades, they form one of the deadliest climate stories of our century. Thousands killed directly, tens of thousands more from disease and hunger, millions pushed deeper into poverty, crops wiped out, kids pulled from school to help families rebuild again. This is what scientists mean by climate vulnerability. The same weather that might be an inconvenience in a rich, prepared city becomes a lethal threat where people have no buffer. In South Asia, there is no neat line between disaster and normal life. The roller coaster just keeps going. Number 1. The 21st century climate cascade, when unprecedented became the new normal. Our final entry isn't a single storm or fire or flood in one country. It's the moment you realize the pattern has changed. In the early 2020s, the world experienced a string of climate extremes that felt less like coincidences and more like a global system glitching. A few snapshots. In 2021, a heat dome settled over Western North America. A small town in Canada reached temperatures hotter than much of the Middle East. The next day, large parts of it burned down in a wildfire. The same year, parts of Germany and Belgium were hit by catastrophic floods. Rivers rose so fast that entire houses were torn off foundations. Streets turned into rivers of debris. Dozens of people died in places that thought they were safely developed. In 2022 and 2023, heat waves rolled across Europe, China, and many other regions. Rail tracks warped, roads melted, glaciers collapsed, and wildfires reached places that rarely burned before. Oceans recorded record-breaking temperatures. Coral reefs bleached again and again. Storms formed faster, grew stronger, and sometimes stalled to dump unimaginable rain. Individually, each event had its own statistics. Some killed hundreds, some thousands, Some only a few dozen, but cost billions of dollars. But altogether, they marked a shift. We weren't just breaking old records occasionally. We were smashing them, year after year. Weather forecasters and journalists started using the word unprecedented so often that it started to lose meaning. Scientists had been warning for decades that as we pumped greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we'd see more heat waves, stronger downpours, longer droughts, more intense fires. The 2020 seconds are where those predictions stopped being future tense and became the evening news. You can't put a single body count on this global cascade yet. It's still happening. But it's already killing people on every continent, displacing millions, and turning once-in-a-century events into, oh, that again, headlines. This, more than any single disaster, is the real horror story. Not one monster you can fight once and be done with, but a climate that has quietly shifted into a more hostile mode while we were busy arguing on the internet. From forests turned to furnaces in Australia, to old people quietly baking in European apartments, from rivers that swallowed whole countries, to storms that erased cities from the coastline, from years of unbearable heat and floods in South Asia, to a world where record-breaking weather happened so often, we stopped being surprised. The deadliest climate disasters of the 21st century didn't come out of nowhere. They came from physics, fossil fuels, and decades of pretending that climate change was just a political debate and not this. The planet doesn't care about our opinions. It cares about energy balance. More greenhouse gases trap more heat. More heat means hotter extremes, heavier rains, more intense droughts, bigger fires. So what do? As individuals, we can push for cleaner energy and smarter policies, support cities and communities, investing in flood defenses, cooling centers, and early warning systems, change how we travel, build, and consume. Not because it makes us perfect, but because every fraction of a degree matters. As societies, we have to decide whether we're okay with millions of people becoming permanent refugees, coastal towns and farming regions slowly dying, and disaster response becoming the main job of governments, or whether we actually want to hit the brakes. Because the future isn't a single Hollywood-style apocalypse. It's this: more heat waves, more floods, more storms, more black summers. Unless, of course, we decide that's not a future we're willing to accept. Which of these disasters shocked you the most? And which one do you think is most likely to happen again in your lifetime? Let me know, and remember, climate change isn't waiting for us to finish arguing. It's already here. The only question now is how much worse we're going to let it get.